We are studying the Gospel of Matthew at the moment, so I spend quite a bit of time, do it in small groups and everything. How are you going with it? You're enjoying it? You're getting into it? I really encourage you, it's not a big book, you can read it in one sitting, but I really encourage you to spend maybe a few months just really digging into it and actually really know what's in there and reflect on it and let God talk to you through that book. I'm up to Matthew 5 here this morning. So I preached on Matthew 1 and Matthew 2 and 3, and the Herminator preached last week. Matthew 5. So basically where we're up to in the story is that Jesus had gone up. He had this encounter with his Father. He got filled with the Holy Spirit. Then he was gathering disciples, calling them, and we know maybe some of the names: Simon Peter and his brother, and then John and James, the son of Zebedee. And so he called them into the ministry, and so there he was, and he was launching the ministry, and the write-up could not have been better. If he had called you as one of the disciples, you would have thought, jackpot! I'm with the right guy! It's amazing. I mean, immediately, nationwide success. I'll read it to you from Matthew 4:23 to Matthew 5, verse 1. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. Large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, which literally means 10 cities, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan, followed him. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him. So, hey, what do you think? If you had been one of the disciples of Jesus, you get called, you were a fisherman one moment, the next moment you're going after Jesus, and he has power to heal every disease. Drive out all the demons, the paralyzed walk, everything is happening. Success, success, success. All the synagogues, all the places of worship are open to him. He is ministering in them with power, and then the fame spreads. The crowds, large crowds, thousands. In the Gospel of Luke, so many, they trample on one another because it is so many. They're from Galilee, from the Decapolis, from Judea, from across the Jordan, and his fame is all across Syria as well. So, you disciple for a little while, you go on a preaching tour like that, you have large crowds, everything. How would you feel?
In the cool group.
The cool group, yeah. And you think, wow, I thought discipleship would be pretty hard, but I think job done. We've arrived. We got the crowds. We got the fame. We got all the healings. We got all the... Man, this is wonderful. We've arrived. Job done. Okay, just pause button for a sec. Living grace. We're still a bit of a little church. And we probably haven't got quite the large crowd that, Jesus had, whatever. But compared to the beginning of where we come from, you could be forgiven for thinking, this is not so bad where we are right now. It's actually nice to be church. And then we think back, and I'm allowed to mention it because it's not, is it 5 months back or not even? We had a pretty large crowd in Mount Barker, just outside of Adelaide. We had more than 1,000 people come to a conference that we put on. And we preached Jesus, and we had signs and wonders and miracles, and people went home changed. And I think back, life moves pretty fast, so, a week is long, so much happens. But, every now and then I think back, and I'm still overcome by how amazing it was. a little church like ours, we had more than 50 people go, actually literally go, spend the money, the time, go, and we put on a conference and we communicated something that was of Jesus, and people received it. Those that experienced the ministry of this church, they were touched by it. And I can't believe that we did it. And I think God thinks a job well done. I'm always got to watch your pride, but I really think He had His hand all over it, and the way we served, stuck out our neck, He was pleased. And so, yeah, wonderful. And then we had, Lutheran renewal. Oh, actually, they had a big meeting in the South Australian Bishops' offering on Friday. The bishop, 2 doctors of theology, the mission director, a few others, and then just a few young pastors from Lutheran Renewal. And, it was about the monthly renewal services we start. And, they did reflect on the conference. None of them went. But they reflected on the conference and they said, there was actually only positive things have come out, and far more positive things than they expected, and really nothing negative. How good is that? How good is that? So, I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm overwhelmed that God allowed us to do it. Then we put on a Lutheran Renewal magazine that goes across the nation, and we have amazing testimonies in those magazines, and they just keep flooding in. I got one yesterday. I don't know that person at all. Came over Facebook saying, I just read your book, and I just read the bits about the gold sparkles, and then I checked my hands and I had it. It's just like, how good is God? And then we had testimonies here this morning, which are mind-blowing. I don't know where you come from, but where I come from, I didn't even read those kinds of things in books, because I didn't know any books that had things like that in them. And then I was discovering the books that had it in them, but it was not in the church. So to finally be at a place where that's in the church, and it's there every week. I mean, we know that if we meet here in Jesus' name, and we worship, we know these here, and things happen. How good is that? Yes. So, we're not in the same league as just what I read in the Bible, right? We haven't got, our fame is not in Syria yet. But, you could be forgiven and we humans are a bit like that, you could be forgiven, we don't compare to that, but it's not bad around here as well. We rock a little bit as well. Jesus is here, and job done, I'm pretty happy, sit back a bit. Would you agree that's a human temptation? Yeah. Because pioneering and working and putting on a conference that's hard work, that's intense. You live a little bit in fear and faith that is it going to work out? And to finally done something, you could rest on your laurels a little bit. It's comfortable. Ease back, bathe in the glow of what you've done, maybe. Well, Jesus has done. Are we there? No. I'm bringing it up. Maybe some of us. It's so easy to lose the fire. You're hungry for more of God, and then finally something happens, and then you think, I've arrived, and then you just back off on that hunger a little bit. Are we there? I'm just putting it out there. I think a lot of us are actually at a bit of another place where we've pressed in and been hungry, and we were on this journey of getting all the things of God, and it's been a bit of a long, hard road. And then finally you get something, and you got maybe just a few runs on the board, and you're so happy. And now, Jesus, I'm really tired. And I need a break. I need a break from ministry. I had enough of crowds. I had enough of this. Can I check out for just a little bit? Are you there?
Yes.
I could be there, but I'm the pastor, I got to come. And like, you know, a lot of things we don't immediately, it's not here. But, you know, like, Lutheran renewal is wonderful, the testimonies are great, but the hostility is relentless as well. Just give you just a small example. So it's a few days before Christmas, probably 2 days before our girls come home and whatever, and I get this email, in my in-tray, and I got the email because they don't have Tatjana's email address. And this email is about 6 pastors in Victoria reading what Lutheran women printed of Tatjana's testimony. She was asked to put her testimony, they published it, and so 6 Lutheran pastors read the Lutheran Women magazine and decided that Tatjana's testimony was absolutely unacceptable. And they wrote a public letter that they published to their 6 churches and sent it to all the bishops and sent it out to everyone and Lutheran women, and it's just public, and basically taking issue with Tatjana, with what she wrote, because in view of the dismay and confusion that this article has already caused. So the day before our girls come, I get the phone call from the national bishop. He doesn't know Tatjana's phone number, so he rang me, and he wanted to console her a little bit, like if she is hurt and upset about this pastoral letter. And then I told him that I haven't even told her about it yet. And I said, look, it's just before Christmas and the girls are coming next day. I'm not going to tell her. Maybe I tell her in January. And he said, he was really with me. That's good wisdom. And just let her know when the time comes that I've called. And so, I mean, it's a bit humorous, a little bit as well, especially, this is cheeky of me, but I quote from their pastoral letter. At this point, one cannot go any further without highlighting what surely has been the standout feature of the article, which is the I bring it out. You got to know. The standout feature of her article, where is it? Has to be the standout feature of the article, which is the absence of reference to baptism. So it's not actually anything she's written, something she didn't mention that, like why, she was sharing about her conversion and life here. Anyway, you know there are Bible books that don't mention baptism? Anyway, I was trying to make the point that you can get weary in the warfare, but not when you laugh like that. Like God contradicted me just now, big time. I didn't see that. Okay. How do I move on now? So picture the disciples. They just had an awesome experience, large crowds everywhere, and the crowds are right there. And then Jesus goes up a mountain, climbs up the mountain, and the disciples come with him, and they're right with him on the mountain, and the crowds are just at the foot of the mountain. And so, how would you feel? Oh, yes! Jesus rocks. Every disease is conquered. The paralyzed are walking. Man, the kingdom is preached. It couldn't be any better. We've arrived. It's all happening. And then Jesus is preaching this. There are famous words. There was a time that when people didn't even know the Bible, they knew those words. So Jesus begins to preach the Sermon on the Mount. And it begins like this. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the poor, pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Is that the sermon you want to hear when you're on top of the world with the crowds at the foot of the mountain, when everything is actually working? Then Jesus says, blessed are you when you're poor in spirit, when you're mourning, when you're hungering and thirsting for righteousness. That's when you're blessed. That's when the kingdom is yours. So instead of thinking, yes, being satisfied and relaxing, whatever, Jesus is preaching about a different state of the heart and the mind, and that is one of hunger, of brokenness, of weakness, of hungering and thirsting, of being hungry for more. Who wants that? Who wants that? Do we want to hear that this morning? Do you want to mourn? Is that really what you want? To mourn, to hunger and thirst, have a broken spirit, poor in spirit? Is that what we want? That's the opposite of comfortable living. That's the opposite of, yeah, everything is wonderful. And Jesus says, blessed are you when you're in that state of mind. Blessed, joyful, happy. That's what the word means. And then all the promises attached to it. Well, I'm not sure. You could take those words, and I'm going to correct the view, but first hearing, it's just like, this Christianity stuff, they're always poor in spirit and meek and mild and, hungering and thirsting. They're the weak people. Who wants to hang around with the weak people that are always mourning? And then Jesus actually, is teaching, when someone slaps you on the face, just turn the other cheek. And then if someone sues you for your shirt, give him your overcoat as well. And if someone forces you to go 1 mile, go another mile with him. Well, what sort of people are that? Like, can't you stand up for yourself and fight for your rights? Are you the butt of everyone's joke? What, Friedrich Nietzsche, of all the philosophers, I like him the best. He's probably one of the most anti-Christian ones, but he's at least consistent. Just like, philosophy, I think for a lot of years, the culture was predominantly Christian. And then those that, wanted to give up on God and just live their own, ruled themselves. They became philosophers, and they argued, trying to do it rationally, to be as good as the Christians. Love your neighbor as yourself. They thought all the clever reasons why, this is rational and logical, and we don't need God to be good people. Until Friedrich Nietzsche finally said, come on, give up on that. If there is no God, there is no good and evil. Yeah, but it took centuries to get there. And so he's pretty consistent. And out of that logic, this is what he writes. What is good? Everything that heightens the feeling of power in man, the will to power. What is bad? Everything that is born of weakness. What is happiness? The feeling that power is growing for resistance to overcome. Christianity has sided with all that is weak and base, with all failures. It has made an ideal of whatever contradicts the instinct of the strong life to preserve itself. It has corrupted the reason even of those strongest in spirit by teaching men to consider the opposite, being poor in spirit. That everyone, as an immortal soul, has equal rank with everyone else, that salvation of every single individual may claim eternal significance, such cannot be branded with too much contempt. The poison of the doctrine of equal rights for all, it was Christianity that spread it most fundamentally. It forged the chief weapon against us, against all that is noble, gay, high-minded on earth, against our happiness on earth. And let us not underestimate the calamity which crept out of Christianity into politics. Today, nobody has the courage any longer for privileges, for master's rights, for a sense of respect for oneself and one's peers. The aristocratic outlook was undermined from the deepest underworld through the life of the equality of souls. Do you know that there are a lot of cultures in the world where people are not considered equal or of value? There are a lot of cultures in the world where you look after yourself, you look after your clan, you look after your caste, you look after your own, and everyone else may just die on the streets. And then again and again and again, when Christianity comes to a country, when missionaries come to a country, they begin to take in the orphans. They begin to take in the poor. Because in Christianity, in God's view, everyone counts. Everyone is made in the image of God. Everyone has a soul, and everyone has a destiny to be in heaven with God the Father. In Christianity's view, those most miserable in life, absolute poverty, no gifts, it doesn't matter what they are. We believe God loves them and created them, and they're of equal worth to everyone else. So Friedrich Nietzsche, a lot in the world, disagrees, and he says the opposite is true. The strong survive. And the strong, they should get everything. And who cares about the weak? Are we believing that? Yes, we do. We're just not honest about it. In Australia, probably the most accepted view right now is there is no God. And we are created by evolution. Which is that principle, survival of the fittest. Get rid of the weak. Okay, so I won't go on that kind of pulpit. You just flesh it out yourself. But Friedrich Nietzsche, did you already pick up on how he blamed Christianity for changing the world, for creeping into politics? Because as soon as people have a different view, and that gets, Christians always have pity on the weak. And it's catching. Actually, the world likes hearing it. And then the powerful feel a little bit intimidated. They can't even be aristocrats anymore and sit on their privileges. And now I come to an observation by an Old Testament scholar, Walter Brueggemann. And it's an obvious one in the Bible. When the prophets were holding a country, speaking to the nation of God and correcting it, usually the first thing that happens to bring correction to a nation is that the prophet starts mourning, grieving. To have a grieving church is revolutionary. To have a grieving people is absolutely undermining all power structures that rule in the present day. For any government to survive, for any ruling class to survive, is you got to have a message out there that this is the best of all possible worlds. This is how it's meant to be. This is how everyone gets the most. Everyone is happy. This is the structure how it's supposed to be. And you try and stop any criticism of that. Because as soon as you have criticism, you have a possibility for change. So you got to keep everyone happy. So the economy goes well, everyone has enough money in their pocket to buy enough toys. There's not going to be any revolution in Australia. All cultures work like that. And the way the ruling class, this is a bit sociology, whatever, they work with numbness. So you're actually no longer really aware of your true emotions, of what the state of beings are. You know, like, are we numb in Australia? Are we numb? Do we actually know what we're lacking as a people? I think we are numb. Because we have enough toys. We are one of the richest countries in the world. And we can fill our day with so much stuff and noise and electronic stuff, and so we got all the toys. But as a nation, we can't have a conversation anymore but about the meaning of life and the destiny of life, and talk about religion or anything. It's banned. Even our politicians are not allowed to hold any faith. That's numbness. And then how many people have we met? They do have all the toys, but they're bored. They have no calling in life, no purpose. So you just while away the time. So that's numbness. And the other one is denial. You're just not acknowledging what is happening. You're just denying that there's a problem. Grief pierces all of that. When the Christians in Australia, when we really are grieving people, and we're grieving over the state of Toowoomba, we're grieving over the state of domestic violence and sexual abuse and the brokenness that are just everywhere. If we start wailing and mourning and shedding tears over a broken culture, how powerful is that? And it's a completely different posture from just, mounting a pulpit and wagging your finger. Oh, culture, you've lost your way, turn back to God or burn. Something like that. It has no love in it. It's offensive. But when you're grieving over the brokenness of people that are in front of you, that does something. No one can argue with it. You can't be sweet-talked into maybe holding a different view. You can't be pacified with concessions or favour, whatever. You're broken-hearted. It communicates big time. And it's undermining the cultures. And I think that's what Jesus is on about. Yes, he got the crowds at the foot of the mountain. Yes, they come. But the job is not done just because they come to a good conference, just because they come to a good church, just because they have an encounter with the healing power of God. That's not fixing everything yet. There's way more to be done. I think Sarah is an example this morning. How many wonderful worship services has she attended over the last 20 years? Heaps. But there's more it's a process. Discipleship, becoming Christ-like, having healing in all aspects of our life. That's a process, and it's not happening overnight. And so if you want to lead, and the disciples that were with Jesus, they were leaders. They were trained to be leaders, pillars in the church. You can't rest on your laurels. You've got to actually see what Jesus sees, and there's still brokenness. And as I'm preaching here, do you pick up that when it says poor in spirit, mourn, hunger for and thirst for righteousness, it's not just about you. Don't read those verses individualistically. You know, this is about me. I'm meant to be mourning about my life, or hungering and thirsting for righteousness, which means I have to have more righteousness in my own life. No. It's those verses are spoken to a group of people, the leaders, the church, and you together, you hunger and thirst for righteousness for the wider community. It's about mission, it's about building the kingdom of God. And when Jesus preaches, it comes out very clearly in just a few verses down the track. It says, you together are the light of the world. You together are the city on a hill. You together are the salt of the earth. So as you hunger and thirst, as you have a desire for righteousness, come into your workplace. You know, you see an injustice. It changes. When Jesus was ministering, he healed every disease and everything. But then it says he had compassion on them. Compassion. In the middle of all the miracles, compassion was coming over Jesus, because he said the people in front of him were like sheep without a shepherd, harassed and oppressed, lost. And I just encourage you, in the midst of the greatest signs and wonders of God displaying the power of the kingdom, the people among us, there's so much that still needs to change about values, about who they are, about discovering a sense of the Father heart of God for them. There's so much to be done. And Jesus, he had compassion. And unless I like it, none of us can do anything that Jesus says without that compassion. I mean, if you're sitting here in church, and this is not an easy sermon, but it's one Jesus preached, and you think, do I really want to hear this? You know, I'd rather hear more about this community picnic we're going to have, and just have a bit of fun time. You know, I don't want to be poor in spirit. I don't want to mourn. And none of us are actually going to go there and listen and really take it. It's not going to change anything that we do unless we're touched by the love that Jesus had. Unless we see people that are doing it tough, and unless there's something in us that reaches out in love, we won't do anything. We just haven't got the motivation or the power or the drive to do it. According to the Bible, that kind of love is actually given to us. We can't generate it ourselves. And really, the poor are not nicer people than the rich. You know, you can get offended trying to help people. So you need compassion. Okay, how do we get there? I want to show you another testimony, and I've shared that testimony many times in this church. So forgive me for showing it again. I let Heidi Baker tell it this time herself. And this is a version of her testimony where she shares a few things that I haven't heard before. So sometimes it pays to stay with something and just really learn it. The testimony that I'm sharing, it happened to her, but I've probably read it so many times. It impacted me so much. It has become part of mine as well. It speaks to me, and I keep thinking and meditating on it because that's Jesus. And it's really explaining to us the Sermon on the Mount, how it begins, just in another way. And maybe we can have the testimony now. 8 minutes, so we'll take a little while, and then I finish off.
Your one was wearing a muumuu.
Yeah,
The other one
maybe
wore
from the
a muumuu
beginning.
shirt to match. I thought,
Well, what is a
Lord, have
muumuu?
mercy. Pink and purple. I'm like, oh,
Kaftan too.
they're precious. Their daughters.
Okay. Thank you.
Precious, their daughters here. It was the hunters. They were there. I'll be really vulnerable with you. I didn't like their clothes. The one was wearing a muumuu. The other one wore a muumuu shirt to match. I thought, Lord, have mercy. It's pink and purple. And I'm like, oh, they're going to knock me over. I don't want that, God. I remember that because they said there's some missionary with double pneumonia, and it was me. I had double pneumonia, and I wasn't going to go up there because I didn't want those people with the muumuus knocking me over. I said, no, not going. They said, missionary with double pneumonia, take a breath. I said, why not? Checked myself out at 2 hospitals to get there, and then got offended when I walked in the door. How stupid is that? I went up because I was healed, totally, completely, utterly healed from double pneumonia, both lungs full of fluid. I went up there, bam! I get knocked on the floor and I see Jesus face to face. That's why I'm like this. I'm like this. I'm like this because I'm in love with him. I mean, I am so in love with Jesus that you just can't stop me. He can, but you can't. Whenever he says stop, I stop. But I'm unstoppable otherwise. Hey! Because I saw him. I saw his eyes, and they burned like holy fire, and he melted my heart, and he just showed me something I didn't want to see. And what he showed me was millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people, children of all ages and all races and all colors. And do you know what I said to God? No! I could either not tell you the truth or let you understand my struggle. I didn't want to see. Just like you didn't want to see what you saw tonight. I didn't want to see. I was tired. I had 320 kids calling me mama, needing shoes every day. We had to eat from dented cans and pray them in. We were so hungry and so skinny and so tired and so burned out. The last thing I wanted to see were millions of children. But I saw his eyes. And when you see his eyes, what can you do? Well, I still cried no. Until he looked me in the eyes again and he said, I died that there would always be enough. Holy! We need fresh bread. We need wine. We need oil. We need wine. We need oil. We need God. We cannot do what we are called to do dry. We have to be full of the glory of God. And it's not an effort to be full of the glory of God. It's a place of yielded love. He undid me that day. He showed me his flesh and he broke it. He showed me his flesh. I saw Jesus' flesh and he broke it and he ripped it out of his side. It was a bloody piece of flesh. And I looked at it and I thought, that's ugly. And he said, feed it to the children. I wanted to cry out no again, but I couldn't because of his eyes. So I just took my hands and I reached it out just to the very first child. And I looked them straight in the eyes in the vision. And then I just kept passing it out. And there was always enough. There was more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And it just kept multiplying. And then he looked at me again. And without speaking, and any of you who have ever seen his face understand what I'm about to say. When you look into the eyes of Jesus, often he speaks to you heart to heart, heart to heart. You cannot see his mouth moving. It's a heart to heart, face to face. It's this connection that changes who you are forever. And he looked at me and he offered me a cup. And it's a cup he's offering tonight in this place because he has given it to us through this time together in the last few days. And especially as we watched what we watched, he's offering you a cup of suffering. And you could say, I don't want to drink suffering. In the same cup is joy. Holy! He's offering it to you. It's the cup he drank. It's the cup that opens up your eyes, that allows you to see what Jesus sees, what Jesus sees, what Jesus feels, what Jesus senses, what Jesus moves and is moved by. And he's asking us individually and corporately to drink that cup. It's a cup of suffering and a cup of joy. Some people think suffering is sickness. And God's asking you to drink sickness. I don't believe that. I believe God's asking you to look and see and hear. See people who are in slavery, to sin, to hell, to pain, to slavery of all sorts, and to see them. That's the cup of suffering. And the joy is knowing there's always enough because he died. So I drank that cup. I drank it. And he said, give it to the children. I'm thinking, really? Really? He said, really? I started to pass it out. It just kept multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. Multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. He said, I died that there would always be enough. He told me 2 times. That's what changed my life. And that's why I am like I am. This crazy lover of God. Just a crazy lover of God because he loves me. Because I know who I am. I'm free. And I'm a bond slave. Hallelujah.
Okay, quickly. So Heidi Baker gets that vision of millions of children running towards her. She had 320 already crying, mama to her. Another million of children, a few million of children, and Jesus says, you feed them. And her response was, Jesus this morning says to you, I want you to see what I see. And I want you to see those that need food, that are suffering, that are hungry, that are victims of injustice. They can't help themselves. I want you to see the world, and I want you to do something about it. And we can go, no. But Jesus has a way of changing our hearts. You know, Jesus said to Heidi, look into my eyes. And nothing actually is going to happen with us at all unless we see Jesus' eyes and we see his love. Unless we actually really, really understand how passionate and all-consuming Jesus' love is for us, until we understand that he died on the cross for each and every one of us, that he purchased our salvation with the highest possible price, and that he had us individually in mind, that he knew us and did all of that for us. Unless we get to capture his heart for us and the world, nothing's going to happen. So Heidi got that. She looked into Jesus' eyes and she said that it melted her heart, it changed her, and she still said no. Liquid love coming out of Jesus' eyes, and then the children come and she still cries out, no. And I encourage, that's our natural response. I mean, she's one poor American missionary in Mozambique, already burned out. She actually came to that conference ready to resign. Double pneumonia. And then she's like, we all are. You know, you go to a worship service, you want healing. Checked herself out of 2 hospitals because she looked for supernatural healing from God. Comes to the service. There are people ministering and healing, but they got moo-moos on. So she got offended, but I'm not going to come forward. Not with those guys praying for me. And then they just said, well, you missionary from Mozambique, wherever you are, I don't know who you are, just take a deep breath. And as she took a deep breath, she was completely healed. We're so stubborn. But if we can just have eyes to see, Jesus is there. Jesus is there with healing. Jesus is there with loving eyes. Just listening to Sarah's testimony this morning. I mean, God will speak to all of us. The love that the Father has for Sarah, it's the same that he has for all of us. So that got to sink in. And then Jesus is asking us a question. It's basically, there's a cup coming from his side. There's a cup, and it's both at the same time, suffering and joy, which is basically the Beatitudes, poor in spirit, suffering. And then you're happy, blessed are you, and yours is the kingdom of heaven. That's the joy. And also, I died that there will always be enough. The kingdom of heaven is yours. I died, there will be. That's the parallel. And we got to choose whether we drink it. Throughout our entire weeks, we have choices we can make. Either we see and maybe stop for the one in front of us and do something, or we just walk away. And it's probably easier to walk away than to stop. But my encouragement this morning is we hear Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And yes, there's suffering involved because we'll get our hands dirty. It will stretch us to our limit. But there's also the joy because we're going to operate in the power of the kingdom. And there's also the joy because Jesus died so that there will always be enough. Jesus knows fully well that we haven't got the resources to do it, but he has, and he's going to provide it. And according to the Testament, and according to the whole Bible, it's going to happen supernaturally. He's going to multiply. He's going to provide from heaven everything we need to make a difference. The cup of suffering and joy. Blessed are you that are poor in spirit, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you that are hunger and thirsting for righteousness, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are those that mourn, you will be comforted. Amen. Amen. Amen.